Hi, namaste, and thank you for tuning in. In this video, I'd like to answer a question that I'm sure I'm going to start getting as soon as I make one tweak to this channel and to my Facebook page and to my Twitter profile, to my Instagram account that I've already made on my Etsy shop, which is changing back to my legal name. Oh my goodness. People have asked me for years, ever since I started this channel under one of the spiritual names that I've gone by, Ma Nitya Sudevi, they've asked, why is it important to change your identity? Why can't you just use the name you were given at birth? What's wrong with your original name? And I've answered it many times, and I stand by that answer, which is that there's nothing wrong with our birth names, with the names that we're given. However, identity is not a solid. It's not a set in stone, permanent, eternal identity. It's not a permanent thing. It's fluid, it's transient, it's constantly changing. We might look into the night sky and see a twinkling light and call it a star. The French will call it an étoile. Different cultures will have different words for different things, but those things remain what they are. It's perceptive, it's elusive, it's constantly in flux. And so if we understand a name or a label for anything as tantamount to being what that thing actually is, then we're missing the mark. My guru, Paramahamsa Nityananda, has said that the reason he gives people spiritual names is so that they can break the association between the name and the identity and go beyond the limited societal identity they've perceived themselves to be. It's a technique. In spirituality, anything that we do, until we realize that state of enlightenment, will be a technique towards realizing it. Calling yourself a new name helps you break that connection or that attachment to all the things associated with the identity when you would hear that name that you grew up with. How many of you have heard a parent get really angry at a kid and suddenly they'll call that kid by all the names, the first name, the middle name, the last name? As soon as the kid hears that name called in that angry voice, they'll get like a fear stroke. They'll freeze. They'll feel like they've been caught doing something. Or in school, if the teacher is asking a question and you don't know the answer, and the teacher does that dreaded thing and calls your name, and you freeze again. When your friends are arguing with you and they roll their eyes and they say your name, it solidifies in your inner space a negative feeling when you hear that name. All the perceived attachments, all the perceived identities that we carry in life are connected to our name. Now, when those build up into a self-hatred, into anxiety, into a negative sentiment towards life in general, we will naturally resist and resent hearing that name. I've had friends who have really not wanted to become like their parents. And they've changed their names. Even in my years before I knew Swamiji, back when I first moved to Vancouver, I knew people who changed their names just because they didn't want to be in the lineage of their family whose choices they saw as not reflective of who they want to be, whose lineage is not what they wanted. When World War II came to an ending, for example, a lot of people whose parents and ancestors had been Nazis moved to North America. They changed their last name because they didn't want to be associated with those terrible crimes against humanity that their last names bore. I mean, have any of you met somebody whose last name is Hitler? Probably not. When it comes to changing our name, our identity itself can start to shift. And like I said, it's a fluid thing. It's not a solid thing. It's constantly changing, evolving, morphing, transforming. But there are also things that we can do to kind of push it in the direction in which we want it to go. When we change our name and when we start going by a new name, our identity merges with and becomes that. When I started this channel, the name that Swamiji had given me back then, Ma Nitya Sudevi, meant excellent. And I strove to embody excellence in whatever I was doing. Swamiji describes when he gives somebody a spiritual name, that name is the culmination of their path in life. It's what they're aspiring towards, what they're working towards. The name that he gives, it's like the path and the goal for his disciple. The name Ma Nitya Swarupapriya, that's the name that he gave me when I jumped into the life path of sannyas, when I took that orange-colored saffron robe that symbolizes burning all of our patterns, burning all of our associative behaviors, burning the identity. And that name meant totally in love with the formless form beyond the perception of the mind. It's a very beautiful name with a very beautiful meaning. Being totally in love with the formless form means being in love with Paramashiva, with Mahasadashiva, with the source of all that is, with God in the highest, with Mahadeva, with Paramashakti, with the God and the goddess, with everything in its unmanifest original state. That name symbolizes a life path of moving into the greatest unknown with loving surrender to that unknown. And it's wonderful. And I still strive for excellence in everything I do. And I also continue to strive to be perpetually in love with that great, mystical, magical unknown, to discover that source and merge with it. And I always will. That's what the path of enlightenment is. But I've also come to a space of immense completion with my original identity from this birth, with the name that my mother gave me, that she knew she was going to call me from the time she was a little kid, thinking about her future daughter, which is the name Sarah. That's also a beautiful name. There's nothing wrong with any title, with any name, as long as we don't hold ourselves to a rigid definition of self. As long as that identity doesn't come like a vice and case us in and put us in a frame and make us feel like we need to explode and break that identity and transform. When we understand that life is constantly shifting, constantly flowing, going through perpetual change, that the only constant is constant change, when we're comfortable with that and we know that our identity is not a prison, it's not a trap, that it's a creative process and it's a journey, we can call ourselves anything we want. There's no need to be attached to any one definition. So you can call me whatever you like. You can call me Ma, you can call me Ma Nitya, you can call me Sudevi, you can call me Swarupapriya, you can call me Samadhi Shakti, the first name Swamiji ever gave me. You can call me literally anything. You can call me Sarah. And I'll happily respond to any of those. Because like I said, I've reached this excited space in my life's journey where I no longer feel like any identity, any identifier, any title, any name, any label either defines me or holds me down or pulls me forward. I'll keep moving towards the goals I set as I set them in a way that's not necessarily linear. It's not a single pointed, set in stone path. It's something I'm discovering as I go, just as I know you are discovering your path as you go. So yeah, it's kind of a long answer to a very simple question. I'm going back to my original legal name because I no longer feel like that name, that identity is something that needs to be transcended. I feel like transcendence is happening continuously in multiple directions, multiple dimensions in every moment. And especially because I've made the decision to come back to a quote-unquote worldly life, to start a business, to live in the world, not in a monastic setting. It just doesn't feel right to use a name that was given as a monastic name. Like I said, that name Ma Nitya Swarupapriya was given when I took Kavi, when I became a sannyasi. Since I've decided to come back and not live that sannyas life anymore, it only makes sense that I come back to the name given by family since basically I've come back to be a part of family. What do you think about identity? How do you feel your name affects you? Do you like your name? Have you changed your name? Did you get married and take your husband's or your wife's last name? Who knows what people do these days? What do you feel about names, titles, and identity? I'm curious. So leave your comments below. And the last thing I'll mention in this video is the jewelry I'm wearing. Of course, this jewelry is from my Etsy shop. I'm wearing some beautiful jhumkis that I picked up when I was in India. I have, of course, changed them, put them on a Western style hook, added a rudraksha, made a matching mangtika, hair part jewelry with rudrakshas, because this sacred seed radiates divine energy when we wear it. It helps us also feel divine. And the pendant that I'm wearing here, it's one of my absolute favorites. I'm not sure if you can see it, but it's this sacred geometrical symbol called Sri Chakra. It's made out of interlocking triangles that represent the coming together and the oneness between Shiva and Shakti, the Father and the Mother God, the divine masculine and the divine feminine, which are not just symbolic, they're also divine conscious beings who are constantly with us, guiding us and supporting us, and each and every one of us has masculinity and femininity both within. So when we realize our own oneness, that interconnectedness in our own selves between our Shiva and our Shakti, when those inner energies become one, we ourselves experience that divine, explosive, harmonious, sacred, pure creative space of being the source. We create, we maintain, we destroy, we delude ourselves, and we liberate ourselves from that delusion. We play those 5 sacred roles for ourselves. So wearing this piece of sacred geometry reminds us that we are that we are Shiva, we are Shakti, we are the divine origin of our own selves, and we're not separate from the entire cosmos. Nityananda has described Sri Chakra as being the DNA of the cosmos, as being like the way we see a double helix, and we know that's an emblem of our identity in its most microscopic form. The same way the essence of the entire universe, the entire cosmos, the entire multiverse, whatever name you put to it, that essence is found in this ancient sacred yantra. So I'm making a lot of jewelry with that beautiful symbol. You can check these out in my shop. I'll put the link in the video description. Thanks for tuning in. Nityanandam. Namaste. Bye.